Donpo Studios started in Chicago, and he had several different locations. Even before the beginning, the outbreak of World War II, as late as a couple months before the war broke out, he was out in California with my mother, and they were visiting my uncle, and they had a desire to move to California. They almost even bought a house in like 1941. But my dad didn't follow through with that. They went back to Chicago. Then, like a couple months later, World War II broke out all over the world. California was in jeopardy. As a matter of fact, the United States government was putting up its first line of defense in Colorado because they thought that the West Coast would be invaded. Fortunately, Japan wasn't prepared to do that. They didn't move out there. And then early in 1942, which was a month after the war had started, the government started to possess all these different supply chains, like the supply for latex, because they would need that for a war effort, for making things like tires and other items that might be used more in an industry to produce machinery. It wasn't available. So my dad had to suspend operations during the war, and he went to work for the Pullman Palace Pullman, which made train cars. At that time, they were making aircraft. So he was building wings for aircraft. He was on a crew that did riveting and the assembly of aircraft for the duration of World War II. It wasn't until about around 1946 that you could again get those kind of supplies. He didn't go directly into making masks because he had another idea, which was to make a golf cart. Oh. And he and another guy that he worked with at Pullman decided that they were going to make golf carts. But that dream was short-lived because somebody else obviously had the idea and was preparing to make gas-powered golf carts soon after the war. So that idea was abandoned, and he went back to sculpture and mask making. But in 1947, as Halloween year was coming to an end, he packed everything up and he moved to Los Angeles. There was one location in downtown Los Angeles. That was the first one. And of course, I'm like 3 years old, so I can't tell you exactly where that was. But he had a place in Los Angeles. And then after that, he found a place more in the Hollywood area, and he had a building there, and I think the building was owned by RCA, but it was up for rent, and so we rented that building for a while. And I remember that building. That was the one that he did, especially the Body Snatchers props for that movie in that building. And that was on Sycamore in Los Angeles. And then he moved up onto La Brea, a couple blocks away, and he had a building that was originally a horse stable for an ice company. Of course, before they had refrigerators, people had to buy blocks of ice, and they had a factory that produced ice, and then they would put them on these carriages, horse-drawn carriages, and deliver the ice. Well, by the time that my dad rented that building, early 50s, they didn't need the stable anymore. They had trucks, and I remember those trucks. They were early 1930s and 1930 trucks that they would still deliver ice in, even though at that time people were buying refrigerators, but there was still a lot of people that used the ice, and they also made ice cubes out of this ice. And I used to go into that factory and watch them take a 250-pound block of ice. It's probably about that tall, like that. And they had a machine that would cut it into ice cubes. And then the ice cubes, some of them would remain ice cubes. Some of them became snow, like for snow cones, things like that. So they had still had this factory. It was called the Home Ice Company. But up in this front building, there was Downpost Studios, and it was kind of a bizarre old building. I'd go down there with my parents in the summer, and it would be hot, so I'd go and I could walk in because they obviously didn't care, but I could just walk into the ice company and stand in there and cool off and watch them make ice cubes. So that was fun, actually. So that was part of what my summer was at the time, when, especially in August, September, I'd be going down to the studio. And I was around that studio like all my life. And through some kind of osmosis, just being standing around and watching as a kid, I was able to really get an understanding how everything was done. Not even by concentrating on it, but just by being there.